Hey, welcome back to the Two Car Garage. I'm Lucas, and well, today we're continuing on with the quest of maintaining the stock heat on Curt's bug here. And if you saw the last couple of videos, we went through and kind of got things set up with some flexible ducting to be able to get around the airbags. And now we're going to go ahead and get the heater box modified to allow the car to drop to its lowest setting. I did show on a previous video that I do have the passenger side box modified. What we ended up doing was raising it up 1.5 inches to allow the tube here to clear the axle when the car is completely laid out. Now I still have to do the driver's side, and we need to finish up one thing on the passenger side. And well, I figured I'd kind of show you through some of the steps anyway that we needed to do in order to achieve this. I guess the first thing we probably should do is take a look at what the actual problem is, and then we'll go ahead and pull the heater box off. We'll get over to a bench and well, we'll start digging into things. So come on up, take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and jack up the axle so you can see where the interference problem is. Alright, well here we go. So here is our problem area. So you can see the axle tube right here, and then this is the outlet for the heater box. It's going to have the ducting that's going to run down to this pipe down here. And what will happen here is as I raise the axle up, and we'll do that to simulate when the car's all the way down on the ground, you're going to notice that as I bring this up, it's getting closer and closer to the heat box here. And now, let me just get this all away here, and that's it. That's as low as I can go right now, and now the tube is actually hitting the heater box. And really, when I look at how much further I need to go, I probably need to raise this up another inch and a half, similar to what we ran into on the other side. And so this is the problem that we're trying to solve here. It's actually not all that difficult. What we're going to end up doing here is we're going to slice the heater box right in this region here. We'll put in a spacer that'll raise this up high enough to allow this to drop fully, and then we just weld it all back together. So now that you kind of see what's going on with the problem here, the next thing, I'm going to go ahead and pop this heater box off. I'm going to clean up all the grease and oil that's caked on it, and we're going to start to disassemble. Alright, well here we go. So I've got the heater box off. I went ahead and took a few minutes and cleaned up all the grease and oil that was built up on it, just to give me something a little nicer to handle here. And now it's time to go ahead and start cutting things up. The first thing I want to do is actually remove this top plate here. This is just the bypass, so when you open the valve here to get heat, it shuts off this little exit. And then when you close the valve, so you're not getting heat in the car, it just allows the hot, stale air that builds up in here to be blown out. So you're keeping this assembly cool. Now, to get this off, if you look here, you'll see that there's just a couple of tabs here that have been bent around, and they're pinching this and holding that in place. So we're just simply going to pry those open. That'll allow this to come off. Along with all those, there's a few places here where they've got a couple of little tack welds. I'm just going to go ahead and clip those off with a cutoff wheel, and I've got one here, I've got one here, and that should just about do it. So really, I'm just going to take a variety of some different screwdrivers. I've got a chisel here that'll allow us to kind of beat around some things, and it's all in all not too bad. So I'm going to go ahead and get this knocked off, and then we'll then show you the solution we've come up with to raise this up. So let's get beating this thing apart, shall we? All right, well, we got the top lid off, and now with that out of the way, you can actually see the flapper valve inside here. So again, when it's at rest, it's actually shutting off the heat so it's not blowing anything into the car. And then there's a hole in the top of this cap that lets that hot, stale air escape. Once you engage the lever here, this valve will come up and close off the hole in the top of the cap here, and then it just redirects all the air into the car. So pretty simple mechanism here, and we just want to make sure that when we get everything put back together that this plate will still actually hit everything nice and square. Now, after I got the plate peeled off here, I did take a few minutes and I kind of cleaned up these tabs. They're going to get bent over a little bit just so when I'm ready to put it back on, I don't have to be fighting with that. I also went ahead and made sure that all of the mounting surfaces are still straight. Now that we've got that part done, it's time to go ahead and hack this off. What I'm going to do here is, because we've got this great big open surface right here that then steps out to this cover plate, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line. Well, I'm not even going to draw a line. I'm just going to use the cutoff wheel because it's nice and straight. And we're just going to cut this right around the front of this, from this corner all the way around to this corner, and trying to keep it as level as possible, although it looks like I'm going to run into the tube a little bit, so we'll have it angled just a hair. But that will allow me then to raise this guy straight up however far I need to go. And again, looking at the axle, probably like the passenger side, and we'll raise it up an inch and a half. But truthfully, we'll adjust it to fit the car. I'll get everything mounted back up, we'll do some measuring, and we'll go from there. All right, there we go. So I've got the top half separated now from the bottom half. After I got it cut off, I take a few minutes here just to clean up the paint where we're going to be welding, smoothing out the edge, and just really prepping it for the next step. All right, so here we are. We've got the axle up now as high as it's going to get. And if I lay this guy on here, you can see just how big a space we have when this is actually in contact. So our goal is to raise this up to the point where I've got, maybe 1/4 of an inch of gap here, maybe even just a shade more. We will never drive the car with it at this lowest point here, so I'm not worried about it running into it then. It's really only when the car is laid out for like a car show or something like that. So now it's really just a matter of figuring out how much of a space we have going on here. I'll make a pattern, I'll get it taped on there, and we'll just kind of go from there. So for the moment here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a quick eyeball measurement, and it looks like about an inch. If I bring this up, I think about an inch would probably take care of it on this side. And it looks like it's pretty even all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make my first pattern here. I'll make it maybe 1.25 inches on this side. Let's see if I lay this down. Yeah, I think we'll go about 1.25 inches here. We'll tape a pattern on there, and then we'll just kind of see how things line up. And if we're good with that, we'll go ahead and make one out of metal. Well, here is a pattern that I used on the other side, and that just simply is going to get taped on here, something like that, and just kind of mimic the shape, and then we'll lay our top half back on there and just kind of see how things line up. All right, well, I got my paper pattern kind of stuck in place here. It's you know, it's a little bit long. It's not the exact shape it's going to be, but it'll give me enough of an idea to let me know if I should move on. So now if I lay this guy on here and kind of rest it on there as best I can, now I can see that I've got plenty of room here. So I am sitting at just about 1/4 of an inch of space. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. Now again, I'm going to have to do some manipulation here to get everything to actually line up once we make it out of steel. But for the moment, this is actually looking pretty good. So now we can go ahead and cut a strip to match this, and I'll make it probably just a shade longer than I need. We'll get it tacked in place here, and we'll do some final manipulation to get things where I actually want it, and then we'll move on. All right, well there we have it. So there's our strip that's going to be laid in place here. Now as far as forming this to actually fit this box, I didn't do anything fancy. I'm not going to do anything fancy this time. I'm really just going to bend this by hand and manipulate it that way to get it to wrap around where I want it. So what we'll do here, I'll just I'll zoom you in a little bit closer. You can kind of see what it is I'm doing. And you know, this form should be a little too long right now. It'll extend past where I need it. That's perfect. We'll get everything kind of fit the way we want it, and then I'll probably tack it in place in a few spots, and then kind of make sure I've got enough there to cover everything, and then we'll trim it to the proper length once it's welded on there. All right, so from this angle, you can see the shape that it is we're trying to mimic. This side here, I may fold up just a little bit to kind of straighten out this angle, but we'll leave it like that for the moment, and we'll just kind of go from here. So now, looking at it from the top here, you can see that I've got to bring this guy around. Want to match that shape as close as possible here. We got to bring this edge in just a little. So something about like that. That's pretty close. Little manipulation there, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now we'll move over here and just do the same thing. We'll just start wrapping this around this corner. So really, we're looking for something about like that. Need to peek it front just a little, and all in all, that doesn't look too terrible. So now with this guy in place, we can take the top half, kind of lay that on there, and really kind of gives me a sense of how far off we are. So you can see on this side here that it really spreads out quite a bit at the top. So I think what we'll do here is, now that we have a kind of a rough idea, again, I'm gonna straighten this side out a little bit. That'll help narrow this up some, and then I'll probably end up narrowing this top even more to be able to meet what's going on here. But a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we're gonna get there. So I'm gonna make a few relief cuts right here. That'll let me fold this guy up a little bit, and then we'll reshape this to match that, and then we'll see what's going on with the top. Well, I think that's looking okay. There's a little more manipulation that needs to get done here, and I'll go ahead and just tweak this now, just to get that to really fit the way we want it to. We want this shape to pretty much be exact, and then I'll probably end up tacking it on this side over here because this fits really well, and then I'll come in and I'll manipulate this guy around until it fits as we're welding, and then we'll worry about fitting the top here. Well, all right, so here we are. We've got this filler piece kind of tacked in place here. I've got it tacked good enough to hold, allows me to do some manipulation here. And you can actually see a little bit, I think you can get it from this angle. I did have to kind of bend this portion in just a little bit. This guy's been manipulated a little bit, and in fact, right here at this edge, I actually had to bring this out in order to meet our top piece here. At the same time, I went ahead and straightened this edge out, made sure that this is going to meet up nice, and just tweaks here and there to get everything to line up. Now, I keep double checking my cap to make sure that that's going to fit correctly. I want to make sure that as I'm manipulating all these pieces, I'm not, accidentally moving things in or out. That still fits fine. And now, when I lay my cap on here, let's see if I can do this so you guys can actually see it. It now fits, if I get this lined up properly, fits pretty darn good. So the shape I'm pretty happy with. The fit is really not too bad. And I think now, really the next step is to go ahead and just get this tacked in place. I'll do the same thing. I'll throw just a couple of tacks around there to make sure that things are going to be held fast, but still flexible enough to allow me to make some manipulations. And then after we get that taken care of, if you look here, we're going to have to trim this tail back just a little bit. But I'm going to hold off on that until it's in place and I kind of get things figured out that that's actually where everything's going to live. And then we'll trim that back and then make sure our cap fits. And then we just have to fill this space here between the cap and the lower tube. So really things are moving along pretty good. I'm going to go ahead now and get this guy tacked up in place. I'm going to throw it back on the car one more time, make sure we're going to have some clearance where we want it. I do know that this portion, this seam on the tube here, does stick out a little further than I like. So after I get things all welded up, I'm going to go ahead and clip this off, well, at least shorten it up a little bit. We'll stitch that seam back shut. That way I know I've got plenty of clearance. So let me get back over to the bench here, get this thing all lined up, get it tacked in a few places, and then we'll throw it back on the car, make sure it's actually the way we want it to be, and then we should be in really good shape. Well, and there we have it. So again, I've got plenty of clearance underneath it. This little seam is pretty close. So like I said, I'm going to come back and trim that off. I probably can't see that, but we'll clip that off after we get everything welded a little more solid here, and then we'll just stitch that shut, and we should be in really good shape. All right, so I went ahead and got everything all welded up here. You can see I went ahead and clipped off this seam just to get that out of the way, welded that shut. I've done a little bit of grinding here just to kind of clean up the welds a little bit. We'll come back and finish that up at the end. But at least for now, everything is really looking pretty good. Put it back on the car, double check the fit, everything's gold. So really, it's time to go ahead and fill this gap here. And if I get this cap back in place, you can see this big gap, you know, because everything's been raised up. And here's what I've done. I went ahead and made a paper template, kind of test fit everything, made sure it was going to work. And then here is the patch that I've made. Because I've already got some of this wrapped around the edge here, I really just needed to fill this gap over here. And so now you can see I've got a little bit of a bend in there, and that guy is going to line up with this corner. This guy, if I can get it in the right spot here, this is going to tuck into that corner right there, and we'll need to do some minor manipulation at the end here to make sure that the arc is correct to match what's going on this guy here, but as of right now, things are looking pretty good. All right, here we are. So I've got this filler piece welded in here now, and you know, there's still a lot of cleanup I got to do just to make things look a little better. But for the moment, when I slap my cover plate on here, everything is actually lining up pretty well. Let me see if I can get this where you can see it. There's a bit of a gap here, but it is contacting up in the upper edge. What we'll end up doing, once we get this all blasted and cleaned and ready for paint, then I will go ahead and get this guy final fit. We'll get it flexed around until it actually is making full contact. And then once everything's pinched in, any areas that I'm unsure on, I'm just gonna stitch weld those shut just to make sure that we don't have any leaks there. But for the moment, things are looking pretty good. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and do some cleanup on this just to get that looking a little better, just to make sure everything is welded proper. I know the welding doesn't look well, it doesn't look stellar. Someday I'm going to learn how to, you know, make my welds look good. But everything is nice and solid. I don't have any concerns with anything falling apart here. So I'm going to go ahead and get that cleaned up, and then when I get that done, the next step is actually for the heat lever. But I don't have levers right now. I went ahead and ordered up new ones because the ones that were on the car are just not in great shape. The pivot points are wore out. They just don't really work for what we're doing. So the new ones are on the way. I checked shipping. They're going to be here tomorrow. So as soon as those show up, then we're going to move on and we're going to get to clipping this off, moving things around. So, well, for me, it's going to be overnight. For you, well, it's probably just a second. Well, and here we are, next day. And just like the computer said, my shipment arrived. I do have my levers here for the heat box. And now we can go ahead and kind of get things wrapped up. So now, let's take a peek here. Now I was using the old lever that I had just to kind of do some test fitting and see what was going on. And it looks like I may get away with not having to relocate this pin. So if I take my new lever and slide it on here, you can see that it actually reaches. And if I run it through its range of travel, well, it actually looks like it's not too terrible. So I think what I'm going to do here first, before I jump ahead and start relocating things, I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments to this and see if I can't make it work in this position. And if I can, we're just going to let it go. If it looks like things are going to fight us too much, well, then we'll relocate it. Now I did have to relocate the one for the passenger side. In fact, let's just take a quick peek at that. You can see here that I've got this little bracket here welded in, and I had to move this up just about an inch to make up for the spacer I put in there. Now the spacer is about 1.5 inches on this side, but I found that I only needed to move the pin up, you know, like I said, 1 inch in order for it to still clear. In fact, if I slap a lever on here, you can see that everything functions just fine. Now there's a little bit of a mismatch here. We'll have to do some adjusting to the lever just to make sure everything contacts nicely. We're not going to be worried about it slipping off, but this side turned out just fine. Again, it's just a little piece of sheet metal. It's been bent into an L here in order to weld to the body in both places, and then I drilled a hole through it, run it through the hole. It's touching the muffler body itself down here, the heater box body itself. So it's welded to the body and welded to the underside of this little plate we added, so that's good and solid. All right, here we go. So I'm going to lay the lever on here, and the first thing I noticed, if I flip this up for you, is that the lever is actually, the new lever is contacting this upper lever just when it's at its rest position. And then if I run this through its range of travel, you'll see that it kind of starts to create a little bit of a gap right there. I'm not too worried about that. I really don't want these things touching. I prefer if this is up a little bit so there's a bit of a gap there. But we can make some adjustments if necessary there. The second thing I noticed, and this might be a little tougher to see. Let's see if I can get the angle right. Where this lever actually contacts the heater box, you can see this back corner right there is actually touching. This pin comes out of the tube just a little bit at an angle. And I think what's going on here, if I try to bend that straight, it's just going to make this problem over here worse. I really don't want any portion of this touching the heat tube except for this little raised dimple in the middle. So I think what we can do to solve that, quite simply, is to just put a washer. It's just a 1/4 inch washer. Now when I slip my lever in place, now that little raised dimple is hitting the washer, and the lever is no longer in contact with the heat box. And if we move back over here, it also serves to space it up away from this upper lever here. And now, if I run that through its range of travel, it's actually looking pretty good. These pieces right here don't run parallel to each other right now. I'm not worried about that. When we actually get this all finished off and get ready to install it in the car, we'll make some final tweaks, make sure everything works good with the cables. But I think we dodged a bullet here, because if we look at it from this angle, this is basically its furthest away point here, and it's still well within the groove. And then as I bring it halfway open, you can see it gets a little bit closer, and then when I bring it to full open, I still have plenty of contact there. So I think honestly we are all set. We don't have to relocate this pin. I'm more than happy with leaving it where it is. With the washer in place, I still have plenty of the pin exposed here, so when I put my little retaining clip on there, I'm not worried about that popping off. So I think we're going to call this a win, and we're going to leave this pin in place, and we're not going to relocate it like we did on the other side. Now, there is another problem though. In my adjustments here to get everything, I wanted both of these pins to be parallel and not skewed to each other. You'll notice right here just how close this lever is getting to this little flange. Now right now everything looks just fine. However, if I put my cover plate back on here, now that we've got that all fit and adjusted, it is actually starting to hit, and it won't even open all the way because of the contact right there. I'm not worried about that. It's really close to clearing, so simply I'm just going to come in here and see if you can see this here. I'm just going to round off this end here. I'll just clip these corners, round this off, shorten it up just a little bit, and we're going to have plenty of clearance. Not worried about strength because really this is just too long. It's just hanging out there. So let me grab some tools. We'll clip this off, round it up a little bit, and then you know, once I've got the clearance I like, we're done. Alright, there it is. So we've got this edge rounded off here. Still has a few burrs we'll have to go after, but that'll happen. But now it does clear this rack, and even if I put it in a really bad spot, we look at it from up top here. I did tweak it just a little bit to raise it up, but now you can see there's plenty of clearance between these two. And if I put my lever back on here, you can see that everything's running free. So I think that's a win. I think we're going to take it right where it is, and like I said, we'll make some final tweaks, you know, once we get everything painted up and get this actually clipped on there permanently. But for now, I think we're in good shape. All right, well there it is. So we've got our new ductwork in place. You can see I've got plenty of clearance here between the duct and any brake lines we've got. There's clearance underneath, so the axle's not actually hitting it. And well, everything's looking pretty good. If you saw the last video, you saw that we've got a pipe that's actually, or a tube that's been inserted into this bracket. That will be welded in, and that allows us to get a really quick connection here. The flexible ductwork is nice, so when the motor's shaking around, we're not going to have any issues there. And then the other side will end up coming up here in the back later. And there it is, another box checked. Realistically, things are looking pretty good. I'm happy with how everything fits. Clearances all look good. You know, remember, this car is never actually going to be driven with the axle in this position, because at that point it'll be basically scraping on the ground. But I wanted to make sure that when it's completely lowered, that we don't have any contact in places where we don't want contact. So that's what we got. You know, the next thing for me, I'm going to get inside the car and get the inner heater channels figured out, because when I put the new heater channels in this car, the angle's not right, and the ductwork on the inside doesn't line up. So really, it shouldn't be too bad. We're just going to have to cut up the new heater channel tube, move that around until it lines up with the ductwork, but that's another day. For now, we're just going to cut it off here. So thanks for hanging out here to the end, and you know, let me know what you think, and you know, until the next one, I'll see you around.